What up, everyone? I'm Dr. Dale Simpson Jr., an archaeologist and anthropology instructor at the College of DuPage. I'm also the director of Illinois Simpson Archaeology, a resource dedicated to better investigate, understand, and celebrate the ancient cultures of planet Earth. Before I begin with my lecture for STEMCON 2021, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of this land, both past and present, both near and far. This includes all of Illinois' First Nation groups. I would also like to acknowledge the College of DuPage and all STEMCON organizers and presenters for once again creating an event that highlights the diversity of scientific study and how each field works to improve our daily lives as human beings. This is my second COD STEMCON, as I was honored in 2018 to be a featured speaker. In this presentation, entitled Behind the Moai Statues of Easter Island or Rapa Nui, I highlighted my 20 years of research on the island and my recently completed PhD. The goal of this lecture was to demonstrate how the island culture was once very complex, and it was through the ability of the elite to economically, ideologically, and sociopolitically organize the culture that helped it to elaborate the famous sites and features it is so famous for, including Moai statues, Ahu platforms, and Pukao top knots. It was a real honor to return to the land of my ancestors and lecture about the amazing Polynesian ancestors of Rapa Nui. If you are interested in seeing that presentation, please check out my YouTube channel, Dr. Dale Simpson Jr. For this STEMCON 2021 presentation, I wanted to use the same approach I did for Rapa Nui, but focus on the ancestors of DuPage County, both prehistoric and historic. To do this, I have created a section of Illinois Simpson Archaeology entitled Walking with the Ancestors, where it is my goal to take you in the field on walking excursions so you have the chance to see the sites through my eyes, my experience, and my passion. For today's trek, we are going to visit two sites, Hedges Station, a historic site, and the Winfield Mounds, a prehistoric site. I truly hope you are enjoying this special digital version of STEMCON 2021, and I anticipate that the following presentation motivates you to learn more about and celebrate the very interesting prehistory and history of DuPage County. So without further ado, let's go with Illinois Simpson Archaeology and walk with the ancestors of DuPage County. Hedges Station and Museum, located on Winfield Road in Winfield, Illinois. Most interesting, this is the oldest building that we have in Winfield. But more importantly, this is the oldest existing train depot anywhere in Illinois. So Hedges Station then is not only important for the history of Winfield, but also for DuPage County and the great state of Illinois. Transportation in Illinois in the 1850s was much different than we have today. Right now there are cars flying by on Winfield Road, but back then you only had your feet, maybe a horse and carriage, or if you had a little bit of money, you could take a train. Usually leaving from downtown Chicago, heading out west, these train lines would stop at a variety of sites that would become later cities like Naperville, Illinois, and Winfield, Illinois. This mode of transport not only carried freight and shipment, but also brought rich and affluent folks who vacationed in the suburbs or who visited their farms. It would be around Hedges Station where the future of Winfield, Illinois would be centered.
But as we will see on this Walking with the Ancestors tour, is that people have been centered around these lakes, rivers, and lands for thousands of years. Now, this is not the original location of Hedges Station and Museum. It was originally located closer to the train tracks, about 1 mile to the south from here, adjacent to the village of Winfield City Hall. But in 1981, it was moved here on village land and has since been the subject of study, investigation, and restoration for almost 30 years. Restoration and reconstruction efforts used recovered and later cleaned lumber from mid-1800s barns and homes. They also used salvaged tongue and groove flooring to make the museum's walls. When salvaged lumber was depleted, old lumber from a mill in Pennsylvania was purchased and remilled to the proper size. Interestingly, within one of the lath and plaster interior walls, which were added in the 1870s or 1880s, a poster was found, written in German, advertising train trips to Minnesota and Wisconsin to buy farmland. I find this very interesting because it shows Hedges Station was a place bringing people together, bringing immigrants together, letting them have a chance to find their American dream by taking these train rails, pushing their manifest destiny from the east to the west, and coming to places like Winfield, Illinois. Originally built in 1849 by Jim Hodges, the station was in use until 1854. The depot served as a rail passenger station along a strap rail track segment laid by the Galena and Chicago Union Railroad. Hedges Station and Museum also shows us American ingenuity. At the time, in the 1850s, there was not large quantities of iron to build new railroad tracks. So what did our ancestors have to do? They built railroad tracks out of wood first, and then just laid one line of iron on the top. I find that very intelligent. It solved the problem of having minimum resources in an area, but still using American ingenuity to solve the problem. After serving its time as a train depot, Hedges Station became a post office, a tavern, an inn, and a later house for the Besch family. 130 years after its original construction, Hedges Station was in danger of demolition. With the planned expansion of Winfield Village Hall and the extension of a parking lot, Hedges Station was designated to be destroyed. This motivated residents to create the Winfield Historical Society, which saved the historic building. In 2004, members of the society built this platform and strap rail segment to replicate the track adjacent to the building's original location. Hedges Station is a great example of a historic site. But if archaeologists go and excavate at the original location, that would be considered historic archaeology. They would be able to excavate the original location and link on the archaeological record to any known records that also exist, especially written or physical remains. Altogether, this gives us a rich understanding of the past of Winfield, Illinois. And to start our Walking with the Ancestors tour, you begin in the Hedges Station and Museum parking lot. There's heaps of room here. There's actually lots of activity on one side with all the basketball and playgrounds. But most interesting is that this is an access point or a trailhead into the Illinois Prairie Path system, used all throughout our state to move people on bikes and hikers and Boy Scouts. It's a very beautiful trail system. So we're gonna jump onto that. We're gonna go north from there, stay on the trail. We're gonna try to hook into the Geneva Spur, which is another annex of the Prairie Path that brings you farther out to the west. But we're actually gonna come back to the east to be able to find those mounds. But we always come up to some signage as an old Boy Scout, gives you a reference point. So Hedges Station Museum, looking good. We're gonna go north on the DuPage River Trail on the west branch. There are 4 reasons why I wanted to do and create Walking with the Ancestors tours with Illinois Simpson Archaeology. 4 ways that we can better our lives through walking with the ancestors. Something to improve our body, our heart, our mind, and our soul. So 4 things. The first is our body. Obviously walking, getting with the fresh air, looking at all the nature, the flora, the fauna, it's all motivating. So it's very good for your body and it sort of warms up your heart, nature, and culture. but you're also going to build your mind, because we're going to learn about sites. We're going to learn about how did people live in the past, what were their resources, how did they produce them, where did they source their materials from. And I think that this is a great entry-level sort of discussion, because not only do we have this beautiful historic site pretty much located right over there, but we also have this 2,000-year-old woodland site that created these beautiful mounds that we're gonna go visit. So we're working our bodies, we're working our hearts, we're working our minds, and maybe the most important, we're working our soul. We're linking back into the people before us. We're linking back into the people of the past. And that's very important for me and my mission in my life. We haven't been walking that long, but we're gonna come up to another trailhead. Here, basically, the western DuPage branch ends. It continues up to the road, out to Winfield and Geneva Road. But for us, we're gonna jump farther on the Illinois Prairie Path, getting us to that Geneva spur. We're gonna go over the DuPage River, and we're gonna go find those mountains. Let's go. This is the DuPage River. Man, I grew up in this thing. Fishing and swimming, canoeing, hunting on the margins of the river for artifacts and mollusks and shells. It was a great life. And for me, it's easy to see why people of the past would also want to live in these areas and take advantage of the same things that I did. Probably the same activities that also brought people to Hedges Station into this area. So we are all linked. We all use a similar land, and we have to respect it and those that came before us as such. So that's why I love the DuPage River, because it teaches us about our history. It teaches us to the connections of the land and how it brought people together. That's a very important lesson of this first walk. Both Hedges Station and these mounds brought people together. The river and the canoes and the train lines brought people together. So we have to remember the past is not that much different from what we are in the present. We have to honor that past. All right, let's keep moving a little bit forward. I think it's time to find these mounds. Before though, I want to put them in sort of an archaeological context, and we talk a little bit about Illinois archaeology, and I think that'll help us with the rest of our walk. So let's keep pushing. Illinois archaeology can be divided into 5 simple phases. These phases help archaeologists better place artifacts and sites into a timeline so we can better understand prehistory and history. These 5 timelines include the Paleo-Indian phase from 12,000 to 10,000 years ago, the Archaic phase from 10,000 to 1,000 BC, the Woodland phase, which we're going to visit today, between 1,000 BC to 1,000 AD, the Mississippian phase from 1000 AD to 1500 AD, and then finally a more historic phase that includes colonial and American periods, and that exists from European contact until today. So these are our general timelines that we use to better understand archaeological sites in the area. While I'll be giving a full Illinois Simpson archaeology lecture about Illinois archaeology in detail and each of the phases, I just want to talk about the points of emphasis for each phase. Now, while we see sites in the United States 15,000 years ago, starting the Paleo-Indian phase, in Illinois, our earliest sites are 12 to 10,000 years ago. And these are the remnants of earlier migrants that were moving from Asia, across the land bridge, into the New World, into North America, and then finally settling in Illinois. The second period, the Archaic, it's much longer, almost 9,000 years. So archaeologists further divide that into early, middle, and late periods. This is an interesting phase because big game hunting had sort of died down and people started to exploit resources all over. And we see changes in their technology and their bone points. So it's interesting to see the evolution through time. The woodland phase only exists for about 2,000 years, but it's a super important period where we see a cultural explosion of people living not only in Illinois, but a culture that expands all over the United States. They're most famous for their ceramics, their projectile points, and their movement in the landscape. After the woodland phase, we see the greatest phase of Illinois archaeology, some would say, the Mississippian culture, with the culture centered on sites like Cahokia, the City of the Sun, just outside St. Louis in Collinsville, Illinois. The Mississippian period ends at that 1500 AD threshold, and we see a more historic phase with these colonial and American periods, which very much vegetation fits into. Coming up to a new intersection here. This will continue the Geneva Spur of the Illinois Prairie Path going far west, but that's not our trail. Our trail will be to the east, and we're gonna head this way. But beforehand, I always like stopping here because there's a very interesting sign, and this sign gives us the first evidence that woodland people were here. Simple sign made by the DuPage County Forest Preserve. These came after the restoration of the site in the 1990s. And if you don't mind, I would just like to read it to you. This trail travels 1/3 of a mile to one of the most important archaeological sites in DuPage County. It is here that you will find Winfield mounds as a testament to Native American presence in our area 1,000 to 2,000 years ago. This trail is established for foot traffic. Please secure your bike or walk it down the trail that leads to the site. Out of respect for the scientific and cultural value of Winfield mounds, please stay on the designated trail, do not climb on top of the mounds, and do not disturb the site by collecting any artifacts or cultural remains. Any person who disturbs or vandalizes the site is subject to prosecution under the Archaeological and Paleontological Resource Protection Act. So it's very important for us, if we're gonna go out and visit these sites and walk with the ancestors, we must take care of them, because the better we can protect them, the more we can study them, and the better we'll understand them. Let's keep pushing. Walking for a little bit longer, maybe 600 feet. We're gonna get off the prairie path here, and we're gonna take this foot trail. Yes. This is one of my favorite parts. You get off that prairie path and you start walking onto a trail that maybe the ancestors walked before me. Some woodland cultural individual stopped at the river, stopped to pick up some fish. Now he's making the trek, or she's making the trek back to the village. I always like to recreate what it would be like in the past. How did people live? How did they survive? How did they thrive? Lucky for us, recently DuPage County Forest Preserve has come in here with a controlled burn to kill some of the undergrowth that we can find in this stand of huge hickory trees. I wonder what these hickories could tell us, the hundreds of years they would have been here. It makes perfect sense why archaeologists found the woodland village here. It's got this beautiful stand of trees that would give protection over the summer months. You also have the DuPage River hundreds of feet away. But before winter would come along, these trees, these hickories, would produce a very valuable resource: nuts, hickory nuts. We know the woodland people had ceramics, and they were probably using the ceramics to boil water, to boil food. You could easily boil these nuts right here. You sort of take out the outside endocarp and access sort of the marrow, the inside heart. From there, this sort of meal can be pounded down, creating sort of like a flour. And then these flours can create cakes. So whatever you're eating for the day, whether it be rabbit or deer or fish, you could easily have a couple cakes to supplement that meal. This adaptation shows us that the woodland people were very intelligent, and they were able to survive and thrive in environments like this. But they took advantage of all the environments and all the ecotones to survive in these woodland areas. And it's about right here where archaeologists found the majority of this woodland village. I can imagine little kids running around. I could see houses that were made with pelts and hides, maybe a little campfire in the front. Some specialists are working to make ceramics in the background or closer to the river where there's resources. And then we see a new canoe slowly making its way down the DuPage River, embanking right here, maybe bringing up new fish and turtles and reptiles for trade and exchange, or to pay off all debts, or just to come together to have a good time. This area was meant to bring people together. This area has brought people together for thousands of years. And then it further brought people out in the 1850s, and now here I am, walking with the ancestor. Archaeologically, we have two dates from this area. The first is about 50 AD, and the second is 1000 AD. So it shows that people used this environment, and they came back after a time to use it again. They further demarked the landscape with their culture. That is one of the most amazing bits of humanity, to come back to where your ancestors were, to revisit those lakes, to revisit those hunting grounds, and to remember the past gone by. Yes, I've made it to the Winfield Mounds after our nice trek, still within this beautiful stand of hickory trees, and we get to come up to the sign that denotes this prehistoric landscape right here. If you don't mind, I'd like to read it to you. The prehistory. Winfield Mound serves as evidence that prehistoric peoples once called DuPage County home. The mounds that you will see, two small round heaps of earth, were built by Native Americans during the woodland phase who lived in this river valley 1,000 to 2,000 years ago. Mounds served as cemeteries or housed prominent places where leaders lived. Because Winfield Mounds are simple in their shape and function and contain evidence of human burials, including cremation, archaeologists classify these as effigy mounds. Today, Winfield Mounds remains the only documented prehistoric burial site in all of DuPage County. This is important stuff. The excavations. After being vandalized and looted in the 1920s, twice, Winfield Mounds were excavated in 1931 and the mid-1970s by archaeologists from the University of Chicago and Wheaton College. They unearthed more than 2,000 pieces of ceramics or pottery that we call sherds or pieces of ceramics and stone tools. Though these efforts uncovered the mound's history, they damage original features of the land. After additional research, Winfield Mounds were reconstructed in 1999 for historic purposes and to protect the integrity of the site. So what we see here are reconstructed mounds, and they have been moved from their original context or location in the environment. Sun's starting to set. We're coming to the end of our first episode of Illinois Simpson Archaeology, Walking with the Ancestors. We've made it into the middle of the mound area, and this is our first one. It's about 1 meter or 3 foot high. You can see the highest point with the pole and the sort of orange flag. This is a very sacred site. Now, we know it's sacred because they were used for burials with cremation found on the inside, but these also could have been used to raise and put houses on top of them to give them more prominence. We know that the later Mississippian people, they also built mounds that put houses and sacred structures on top, and this may have been sort of the entry point for that. I can totally see why the people of the past lived here and were later buried here. It's a beautiful place. It's full of unique environmental ecotones, including the DuPage River and all its tributaries, stands of hickory that would produce the nut that would give flour for the long winters. You have prairies on one side, marshes and swamps on the others. This would have been a perfect place for people who are adaptive to live, to expand, and to enjoy life. And it makes sense that the people taking that train from Chicago out to Hedges Station were also looking for something similar. The fishing, the good time, the swimming. And here we are today, walking the same trail created by the DuPage County Forest Preserve. And these sites are super important because these trails link us to the past. And that's exactly what Illinois Simpson Archaeology wants to do. I want to make links to the past. I want to bridge the gap between prehistoric and historic. And I think by doing that, and I think by walking with the ancestors, we can better improve our mind, our body, our heart, and our soul. And if we all do this together, this world's going to be a better place. So signing off for the first episode of Illinois Simpson Archaeology, Walking with the Ancestors, I'm Dr. Dale Simpson, and remember, the best thing that you can do in the present for the future is learn about the past. Take care, everyone.